You're listening to The Big Lift, the podcast of Webtrends Optimize, the CRO solution that enables marketers and developers to maximize the ROI on their digital properties. Webtrends Optimize is a powerful, feature-rich and easy-to-use solution, all delivered within a fixed-price contract with no additional cost for increased functionality ever. During these podcasts, we meet some of the key influencers within the marketing and conversion world to understand their roles and examine their challenges. Today, I'm talking with Kit Highway, Director of Optimization at optimization agency Daydot, regarding a white paper he has recently published entitled Cracking the Code to Digital Media Subscription Success, or put it another way, tips to engage potential subscription users to sign up. This will be the first of a series of podcasts, this first one being around acquisition. So Kit, let's start off with a broad question or two around subscriptions. We all know digital media seems to be outstripping physical media, and now every film, newspaper, magazine and periodical is available online. But in an always-on world, is it worthwhile to pay for content, and are the level of subscriptions increasing?
So I do think, absolutely. There's more and more opportunities for users to subscribe. I guess taking a step back, I like to think of subscription in terms of why do people subscribe in the first instance? What are the broad categories of subscription? And in that way, I think there are three key things that's useful to think about when considering subscription. Products. So this is something obviously physically that you're going to buy, that you need, and you realize after a time, I'm buying this the same time every week. I'm buying it the same time every month. It might be loo roll cleaning products, pet food, maybe even food for your house.
I don't know many people that subscribe to loo rolls, to be honest.
You don't?
No, it might be just me.
You'll, after this conversation, you'll be a convert. You'll be looking around there for loo roll subscriptions. But you realize kind of that's something that I need every time, same time every month, and there's a convenience to me not kind of having to go through and purchase that, even if it's an online purchase, offline purchase. I just want that arriving at my door. I know I'm going to need it. Why not just subscribe to that service? A second kind of area of subscription is services itself. So something that someone else produces, offers that you want access to. So that's a real broad range of different offerings. It might be a newspaper, a writer's thoughts that you want access to. It might be the latest HBO series or television series or sports content. It might be even access to your local gym. It's something that someone else produces, it's of value and you want access to that thing. And then finally, the last area of subscription I like to think of are causes. So these are things that you care about, but you're not explicitly expecting anything back from. You want to support a particular crisis. You might want to protect the environment. You might want to help someone you've never met. It's something that you're willing to kind of offer money towards, that you're wanting to subscribe towards or have a membership around. But again, it's around that belief rather than kind of actually getting anything intrinsic back. And obviously there's a lot of blend as well. So between those categorizations, you might find there's a lot of services that are combined. So you get products and services in combinations. That might be like a cleaning service. Someone will come to your house, they'll have all of the cleaning products. You never need to buy bleach or spray again, and they'll get the job done. You've got a lovely empty below the sink cupboard now that you've got to decide what to use for. There might be services and causes combined, like the whole patron community online. So there's content creators now kind of producing content every week who want you to kind of support their endeavor in producing all of this content. And so you help them with that. And then finally, you've got almost the holy trinity. And there's only a couple of cases here where you get products, services and causes all in one that you might want to subscribe to. And the big one here for me is the National Trust. So you get the fantastic magazine every month. That's your product. You get the services. You can enter the property. You can see the work that the fantastic gardening teams are doing. And then finally, it's a cause. You know that membership's going beyond kind of what you're actually physically getting from that and the experience you're getting from that to support things that you're not seeing in, the buildings maintenance and building out those green spaces throughout the UK. So when considering subscription, I think it's really useful at the start to kind of consider which one of those offerings you're looking to kind of help with your users.
So that encompasses quite a lot of different areas, and I'm surprised how many examples you've managed to use there, which obviously is all part of this conversation. But tell me, what's the difference, if there is any difference, between engaging with a potential subscription user and just normal engagement?
So yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to really vary dependent on which one of those categories you're wanting to kind of encourage subscription around. So for product subscriptions, the difference there is just the realization that there's some ease in having that product come to you without the effort of buying it every single time. It's something that you want, same time, same place, every single month. Let's just take away all of the hassle of going through, of buying that, and make it convenient. So that convenience is a real big kind of selling point for that style of subscription. For services, obviously, it's really access to that service. So with those, newspapers, with series, with access to your local gym, you'll block access until users actually are able to subscribe to that service. You might give them a taste of what it's like so that they can really understand it, understand the value of it. But ultimately, you need to kind of block the access in some way to make sure that subscription has occurred to allow them to finally access it. And causes, it's an education piece, I think, more than anything. So people might want to donate to a cause in a one-off kind of donation as a block. But if you're able to educate those users to let them know that their cause and their value can go further by kind of donating in a monthly way, that's the real kind of trick there in bringing in that education and making sure that they can kind of understand it more effectively.
In essence, you're still writing great content in order to get people to go through the registration wall. And that will vary, whether it's a charity, whether it's a sports subscription, whatever it might be, that varies. But when you go into the different types of products, such as charity subscriptions and things like that, there are different kind of barriers that I would think. Some of the things that I find really frustrating in some of these things is that they do put an immediate barrier up. There's no trial period, or there's, if you want to read this, you've basically got to pay us $4.99 a month or whatever it might be. There are others that are more subtle in the way that they will give you maybe a 7-day trial or a 30-day trial or whatever it might be. Are there horses for courses for this, or is it basically you should be giving everybody a trial and then pick them up later on?
So I think the way to turn that on their head a little bit, with all of these services and products, you want them to understand the value of your product. And that's the first thing in that kind of early stage. When they're exploring the product, you want them to kind of understand the value and for you to understand what their unique value in that product is. So you want to give them time to really engage with that product. And if you think part of that engagement is also encouraging to come back, encouraging them to access kind of email content, other content that they might not be able to find by themselves, a reg wall could be a really powerful tool, but you don't want it to be a hard block in any way, because it's not going to have that end goal of getting them to completely explore the product, to fall in love with that product, so that they're encouraged to subscribe down the line. For some of our clients, we found that actually making those reg walls, those early kind of blockers in the subscription journey dismissible and not making it a hard stop for those users actually has a real net benefit effect on overall subscriptions, boosting that by 8%.
I would think that actually by doing that, you've got a very good ability to go back and say, you've now read 3 articles with regard to this. There's obviously some interest in this. We'll give you another week to be able to sign up. Does that sort of thing work?
Absolutely, and I think it's going to depend on your product, and it's going to depend also, actually, even inside of that, on particular users. So you'll want to be really personalized with how much content you give some users and how much content you give other users. For some, they might need to consume a lot to really understand the value of that product before you start to put in those hard blocks to force kind of subscription before they're able to engage with any more. Whereas some other users might kind of immediately recognize the value, immediately kind of fall in love with your product and be ready to kind of transition into a subscription. So you can only learn that through testing and through kind of starting to explore personalization strategies.
Yeah, I was going to say the personalization strategies must mean a lot in this kind of instance, because you're not dealing with one type of person. You're dealing with many different genres, many different ages, many different cultures, and all trying to be able to do the same thing. So that whole personalization thing must be a completely separate avenue just around testing to be able to add more of those layers of personalization, not just in the content on the website, but also in any emails you might be sending out as well. Does that seem to be the phase 2 of being able to get people to sign up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in that first phase, as we said, that the real goal is to get users to fall in love with your product. If registration is going to help them to fall in love with your product, great. It allows them to explore more of it, amazing. But don't put any blockers in the way of a user falling in love with your product and really exploring it. The other thing you need to make sure you're doing in phase one is picking up on all of those signals. Every user is not going to love every single part of your product. They're going to love different parts. I think back to when I had one of my first relationships, and I'd go up to see a family who were subscribers to the Times, and they got it to their doorstep every Sunday morning, and the whole family would take up the different parts of the magazine that interested them the most. And it was really passionate for them. And say, one person would be furiously reading culture, another would just be looking at the sport, another maybe just the financials. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing when people are consuming content online. Their interest isn't going to be for the whole service or offering you have. It's going to be for particular parts of that. So whilst they're exploring your product, you need to make sure you're listening out for those signals and picking up on them. And so when you finally get to that point where you think it's appropriate to put up that wall and say, hey, we need to actually have a little bit of support to continue offering you this product, it's important to make sure you're using all of that information you've got from them to personalize that message, to talk to them in kind of a normal human approach.
So there's the registration wall. The first interest is, I'm interested in this, but I maybe not be signing up and committing money to it, but I'm interested in finding out more. And that's obviously an avenue for using that personalized email content and things like that. But the next bit, which is the paywall, which is the bit where you've got to take your hard-earned dosh and stick it on the table. Are there any tips and tricks around that particularly? Or is it just, hopefully you've warmed people up enough to be gone through the registration wall, they've read a few contacts and now come up with the cash or goodbye?
No, so I think this is where we've had so many interesting insights through testing. I think the big one for us is just not adopting a one-size-fits-all paywall.
Right.
A paywall that's the exact same for every single user, no matter what content they've consumed, no matter how frequently they're coming back. You need to use that information to really craft that paywall and showcase the right product for them and the right USPs for them. So a user will have told you loads of information around what they like, how often they want to engage with your product, what the kind of right end kind of relationship is going to be for them. And you want to position that back to them, and you showcase them the paywall, making sure that you're kind of using that personalized content to really persuade them and showcase them their unique value in the product. A good example of this is, I guess, on the Athletics' current journey. I think they're missing the mark a little bit here. So the Athletic are obviously an organization that provides sports journalism and lots of really incredible content. Their writers are superb, putting out some really insightful kind of analysis on matches, on teams, on transfers, all of this stuff you need to read if you're a sports fan. I'm, for my sins, a Tottenham Hotspurs fan.
Somebody has to
so
be.
I know. So I'm often on there reading all of the Tottenham content. And that's where I'm starting to kind of really build an affinity for those writers, for that content. And so I'm engaging with it lots and telling the Athletic lots of information. But when I get greeted with that paywall, again, it's one size fits all. It's just access all of the Athletic for X price a week. And that feature-led copy just isn't really connecting with me at all. It's not recognizing why I'm here and what's going to motivate me to actually consider subscription. A tiny little change there, just saying kind of unlock your team names. In my instance, Spurs transfer news and tactics for just X dollars a month or X dollars a week is going to be all the difference in kind of actually starting to build a relationship with that user and showcasing the value of that subscription effectively. We've seen it massive conversion rate changes by just starting to have that human conversation, starting to recognize how users are engaging with that content in that kind of earlier stage. Moving to this kind of slightly personalized message pushes up conversion rates on whole by 13% we've seen.
This is an unfair question. I know I'm asking an unfair question, but is there an optimum time delay between registration and paywall?
So again, I think that's going to be completely dependent on the product and on your different user groups. So for some products, you might want to be a little bit stronger and kind of have them only explore kind of, 10, 15 articles or 10 pieces of content before you want to share up that paywall and tease them that they need to actually obviously get a full subscription to access more. Whereas others, you might need them to have a much longer consideration time to really find the value in that product before they're able to actually meaningfully consider subscription. Even beyond that, it's going to be on a user-by-user basis. So you might want to start to explore testing, personalizing for some kind of lower intent users, how slowly that paywall or that hard block comes up, and starting to improve it, showcase it higher up the journey for higher intent users. Ultimately, it's just not one size fits all. You're going to want to test and learn to find kind of what's best for your product. And then inside of that, what's best for the different segments and user groups that your product is being used by.
That seems like it's not a quick resolution to find the optimum. It's obviously a lot of testing of different things and different people. And as different people, if you like, register, they may be something that you haven't seen before or don't fall into a cohort that you've used before. It seems that it's again using the idea of continually testing to be able to drive the optimization of just this registration to paywall. That seems like it's an ongoing thing. Is that something that has to have dedicated resource to, do you think?
Absolutely. I think, again, if you're not listening to what your customers are saying, listening to how their evolved relationship with your product is, you're going to miss out, and they're going to potentially fall out of love with your product over time and move elsewhere. So you need to make sure you're constantly looking at your data, talking to your customers, and then using that information to craft experiences that are meaningful to them. Going back a little bit to that point around if there's too little or too much time of content to give a user before you start to throw out that paywall, I think the one big thing you don't definitely want to do is have it almost immediate. So frustration free at the moment is The Telegraph. They've got loads of really powerful content, and they've done a great job. I don't know who in their team's responsible for this, but they're getting on all of the kind of Chrome's discovered articles and places there. Fantastic work. I click through on one of them and I'm immediately blocked with kind of a start your free trial, undismissible banner that obviously just starts to irritate me, destroys any potential relationship I'm going to have.
You and me alike.
So I think you've just got to make sure that you're giving a little bit of time for a user to build some form of relationship with that brand, with your product, before you start to kind of bring in that block, but finding that sweet spot between the two.
And do you think there's room in this whole discussion to variable subscription rates depending on what the content is?
Absolutely. So again, as I was saying before, each user is going to be interested in different parts of your content and going to want a different type of relationship with you as to how they engage with that content. So we're seeing some of the more sophisticated subscription models now are really offering completely different ways to engage with that content. Not just kind of it's always on, you subscribe and you're with us for a month, or you're with us for 6 months, or you're with us for the full year. Now it could be you're with us for this particular series, or you're with us for this particular sporting event, or you're with us just to kind of start to explore this particular range of content, but you don't have as much affinity for anything else. You're having a smaller package there. I think allowing users to personalize how they engage with your content and what type of content they're engaging with is ultimately the way to build a really meaningful relationship that your users are going to love.
So let's take a little step backwards to the registration wall. Have you got any tips and tricks that you've found seems to work for registration walls? It's that initial content, or maybe 2 or 3 instances of that content that works well? So
I think with the registration wall, the first thing you really need to do is ask, do you need the registration wall? Are you going to use this information? It's like when you're designing a form, are the fields in this form actually going to get used? Are you asking for this information and leveraging it elsewhere to make a better user experience, or is it just redundant? And if the answer is no, we're not using that registration, we haven't got a system in place to connect with a user, to showcase other parts of the experience that they might have missed, don't employ it. There's no point in kind of using it there if you're not actually going to effectively use it down the line. Mm-hmm. The other big thing for us, and we've learned this massively, is don't make it a hard block. Again, at that early stage, even though you might think that forcing registrations is going to allow us to start to market to them more effectively, it's going to get them more engaged. It's going to allow us to sell our product more effectively. It's going to put off potentially a larger bunch of users than the users that you might be able to start to market to effectively. We found that allowing users to dismiss their registration wall gives, on average, an 8% uplift to overall subscriptions, just because you're allowing them to kind of consume and appreciate that content a little bit more.
What about personalizing content based upon previous behavior as you move through, even though they may not be registered? Obviously, there's probably a cookie on the machine.
So I think there's never a time where personalization isn't kind of appropriate. So as you said, even when that user's starting to build a relationship with you, they're already giving you signals around the content that they're interested in, how frequently they're coming to the site. And so when you showcase that registration wall message, it's important to sell that value prop in the registration wall rather than, again, this generic one-size-fits-all message there. We've seen some real value in kind of even just bringing in on a typical kind of newspaper site, the article that a user was reading, that you're starting to kind of half block them from continuing reading, saying continue reading, and then just that article title inside of the registration wall. And that itself alone has really helped to improve conversion rates.
I'm assuming for charities and things like that, it's a different kind of story, because people are on that page because they care, and therefore the fact that they care, they want to help, and help in a charity's world is usually either time or money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, again, when we look at the two big reasons why people are motivated to give to charities, it's really duty or impact. So duty, you can see something in the world that you feel is wrong, you are motivated to support it and to change that. An impact, maybe you're appreciating the change that an organization is having on the world, and you want to help kind of move and to help them to achieve that change and push that change even further. That's just a small snapshot, but that's a couple of reasons why users might be motivated to donate. The difference in the kind of charity sector between a one-off donation and a monthly donation is really two things: education and affordability. So a lot of customers might not understand immediately that one-off donation might have less value for the business overall than kind of an ongoing monthly donation. Mm-hmm. And so at certain points, it's appropriate to try and communicate that education to them. So say you've got a user who's considering donating a one-off kind of £50 amount. That's maybe an appropriate time to say, hey, we can make that kind of go a lot further if you're willing to kind of support us in the long term. At £5 a month, obviously that nets out just of £10 more in the first year, but it has a longer ongoing relationship with them. So that's one in the education piece. The other one is obviously affordability. So you need to make sure you're balancing that ask with it. It's appropriate to kind of really ask that question to those users. So on another version, if a user is about to give you a one-off donation of £5, it's probably not appropriate at that stage to say, hey, would you want to kind of change this to a £5 a month donation? Because that might not be in their realms of affordability. So it's getting those signals from the users, understanding if it's right to ask that question, and if it's right to educate them. And if it is, starting to kind of really showcase how that value can be taken further.
I think some of the value propositions that you say is on some of the charity sites that I've visited, it's getting to the point of saying, actually, for this amount of money a month, we can do this. For this amount of money, maybe twice as much, we can do this. And it's offering different kind of resolutions to problems which have a cost associated with it. And I think in a charity sector, that seems to work well. In fact, in a sports sector, you pay more, you get more content, etc., etc. But I think it's definitely pulling at the heartstrings in a very subtle sort of way that is quite different to for sport or whatever it might be. You're looking for a sports channel because you're interested in it, or you're passionate about a particular football team or a Formula One team or whatever it might be. Pulling at the heartstrings, I think, is very emotive. Do you think it's only charities that use that kind of passionate approach?
So I think it's about making things relevant to users. And again, always in the back of your mind, making sure you're treating any user on your site like a human. You're really respecting them. I'd always say you don't want to try and employ nudges or tactics to try and trick them into kind of actually engaging with that product or start getting something that ultimately they don't need. It's about finding time to kind of showcase the actual value of the subscription, the value of the product, allow them to test it, allow them to kind of understand it, allow them to hear from what others are honestly and authentically saying about experiencing that product in the long run. And then when the time's right, asking them to consider actually paying for that service, and making sure at that point you're engaging them in a way that's personal, in a way that's kind of recognized how frequently they're wanting to engage with that service, the types of content they're wanting to get out of that service. And so for some users, it might be that they're giving all of the signals that they want everything. They're happy to kind of have the full bells and whistles subscription. That's the one that we can start to advertise as being the most appropriate for them. They're constantly on the site. They're engaging with all of the different content. Whereas for other users, again, it might be that they clearly have an interest in one particular subservice. And so you might want to kind of showcase that. And then if there is kind of benefits to having them kind of like grow or upgrade that subscription slightly into another area to get slightly more out of it, showcase those. But again, tailor that to that individual. Don't just assume that everyone's going to want everything.
I often describe paywalls as a hump in the road of a customer journey. Because you get to the point of saying, yeah, this is quite interesting, and now I'm being asked to actually pay for that. Now, obviously, that's where we come into value, and I'm conscious of the fact that the second of these series about onboarding and getting value from subscription is something we're going to talk about in a subsequent podcast. But is there any way of being able to, I suppose, make that softer than the hump in the road?
It's a really interesting question. I guess for service-based subscriptions, it needs to be a certain level of blocker, because at some point you're going to need to ask users to meaningfully engage with you, to engage with you financially, to continue to kind of have access to that service. And so we found, again, unlike the registration rule, it's probably not useful to kind of make the paywall dismissible or too easy to kind of game or to play around with, because users, some subset of users will definitely try and avoid it and will never engage with that product. And ultimately, that's something that you'll need them to do. You need to kind of make sure that they understand that your product is valuable. It does come with a cost, and it needs supporting. But again, I think the big thing here is making sure that you're using the information that their users already told you about them, about their preferences, to showcase the product that's going to be most suitable for them and the USPs that are most meaningful to them. Another big part of that is allaying fears. So again, I think as users are starting to get to that phase of considering purchasing a subscription, one of the biggest kind of worries for them is around cancellation.
Yeah.
It's around kind of ease of cancellation, it's around kind of accessibility of cancellation. So it's really important to make sure that you're showcasing that message as well. You craft some copy that's personal to them, that's recognizing the particular part of that magazine, of that service that's meaningful, that they want to get out of it. You start to showcase products that are most appropriate for them and subscription timelines that are going to be most appropriate for them. And then finally start to really allay fears. Let them know, we're not trying to trick you. We want to develop a meaningful relationship with you over time. This isn't something we're trying to just get you through the door, and once you're through the door, we're going to forget about you. And I know we'll discuss that a little bit further down the line.
Yeah.
But it's important to kind of let them know that and reassure them that it's easy to cancel. It's easy to kind of step out of the subscription whenever you feel it's appropriate for you. We found just adding that messaging to those key parts, and this is particularly not the paywall, but the subscription landing page itself, adds to often an 11% boost in overall subscription conversion rates.
So, in conclusion, what's the future of subscription, do you think? Do you think it's going to gain even more momentum?
So I think it's a really, again, an incredibly interesting question. I don't want to get too far ahead of I know we've got a series of other podcasts here around onboarding and around cancellation and exit. But I think it's about developing a meaningful, lifelong relationship with the consumer. So it's not about trying to get them through the door, get that tick, get that first acquisition, get that conversion count in by any means necessary, by hook, by crook, employing any nudge or tactic you can, and put them into any product you can. And just assume then that they're going to be with you for life. You've got that customer forever. they're kind of an unhappy British gas customer, whoever it might be. You want to treat them humanely, so you want to make sure that they're understanding the value of your service, they're wanting to explore that service, and then allowing them the opportunity, if they need to exit that service, but in such a graceful way, in such a way that's respectful of who they are and what they want, that they're very likely to re-engage with that service at another point in time. So again, I think that's, in my mind, where the future of subscriptions are. It's kind of that ongoing kind of evolving relationship with a customer. In the first instance, they might want to just test and try the service for a month or two, and they might want to come back again for 6 months to catch a particular series or to catch a particular period of sports. And then they might find themselves in a different financial situation and feel, actually, I'm ready to evolve this relationship again, to kind of have an ongoing relationship here. But at all of those points, you need to make sure you're respectful to those customers. You're kind of personal to them. It's an ongoing conversation that you're having with them to see what best value they can get from your service.
I would put it into the same vein of starting a relationship with someone in the real world. You know, you go out with a boy or girl, whatever it might be, and you want to be able to think, actually, is this the right person for me? You don't immediately ask them, well, do you want to get married? Or do you want to move in
Absolutely.
with me? It takes a bit of time for that to take place, and eventually you think, actually, that's the right time to not necessarily ask the question, but move slowly towards cohabiting or whatever it might be. And then later on,
Absolutely.
it could be marriage and then more children and things like that. It's building that relationship to last more than 5 years or 10 years. And I would say subscriptions are like that. If you get a good person who subscribes well, you could keep them for 10, 20 years if you're delivering the value out of that relationship along the way. So to get it right is not just, you're not getting 50 quid or 100 quid from that guy or girl. It could be that you're getting thousands of pounds over 5 or 10 years.
Absolutely. I think it's always taking a step back and trying to kind of avoid looking at those really close metrics and getting obsessed with them, and realize that it's a lifetime relationship. And it might be appropriate for that user to leave the relationship at certain points and come back again. So I think that's the big thing for me, is it's just crafting that longer term relationship with users, being respectful of them and not looking for those short term gains that are ultimately going to damage them, damage any lifetime value you might get with that user, and potentially really jeopardize your reputation on the wider scale.
So Kit, thank you very much for this. I'm looking forward to the next series of the podcast around onboarding and getting value from subscription, which is we've touched on a little bit this time. But for now, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been great to chat.